Evelina mai kako, and welcome to the Hawaiian Kingdom Podcast. Evelina mai kako, and welcome to the Hawaiian Kingdom Podcast.
Aloha mai kako, kalau kalani ko uinoa. My name is Kalau Kalani. Today, I have an honored guest, Donovan Preza, who wrote his master thesis, The Empirical Writes Back, re-examining Hawaiian dispossession, resulting from the Māhele of 1848. And it basically challenges one of the most common narratives about Hawaiian land history that we've been told. Rather than arguing that the Great Māhele itself would directly dispose native Hawaiians of land, Donovan Preza contends that the historical record is more nuanced. He distinguishes between the Māhele, the Land Commission, the Kuleana Act, the Land Commission Awards, or LCAs, royal patents, and later government land purchases, arguing these were separate legal processes that often conflated. His research suggests that Aboriginal Hawaiians acquired substantially more land throughout multiple legal mechanisms than the frequently cited figure of 28,650 acres awarded through Kuleana awards alone. He also argues that widespread dispossession accelerated after the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom government, rather than being an inevitable consequence of the Māhele itself. And again, just want to thank and mahalo Donovan Preza for being here today. Mahalo.
Thank you, Alex. Glad to be on.
Fantastic. What inspired you to revisit one of the most debated events in Hawaiian history?
Interesting question. A couple of different things. I have two stories of inspiration that got me started, but there's little stories also, like, for example, I was taking geography of Hawaii in my undergrad from Dr. Carlo. He wasn't doctor back then, but from Carlos Andrade. He was teaching the class. And just so happened that we all had to present on a chapter, and the chapter that I presented on was the Māhele. And so these little coincidences, if you will, like that, or just little things along the way. One Merry Monarch, I just had this feeling that I have to go find the Māhele book. And my cousin danced, and we went up for Merry Monarch and went to one of the craft fairs. That's when the craft fairs were, this is 25, 30 years ago. So this when the craft, Kaiko'o Mall, where the county building is now. There was a craft fair in Kaiko'o Mall, and I found a copy of the Māhele book.
Oh, wow.
Fred and Honani Baker had a booth there. And as part of their booth, they were selling a thick, Kinko's bound, spiral bound booklet, and had a bunch of things on Hawaiian Kingdom law and other things. But one of the things they had in there was their typescript, like typewriter kind transcription of the Māhele book. I don't think I've ever shared that story in public, but
Oh, wow.
so just little things like that, like just had this feeling, hey, you got to go find the Māhele book. And I go to Merry Monarch Craft Fair, and they're selling the Māhele book.
Wow.
Then I have two other stories. I was interning at Kamehameha Schools in their GIS land asset department, in their GIS department. And two stories actually from that experience. One was, I met a gentleman by the name of Lloyd Soren. He's a retired Bishop Museum archaeologist. I don't know him in that capacity. The capacity I know him is his place names research. If you go to ulukau.org, the Hawaiian Place Names Index is his. There's two. One is Victoria Creed at Waihona, and the other one is, I may have gotten the name wrong, but I believe it's the Hawaiian Place Names Index. And that one's with Lloyd Soren. And he came to Kamehameha Schools and was trying to correct the place names on the USGS quad maps. And he was talking to anyone that would listen. And the surveyor on staff at the time knew I was interested in Hawaiian land title type things, and ended up going to his house and seeing his work. He lived in Kalopa on the Big Island at that time.
Hmm.
And he had an old school index card file, like old school card catalog. How, I don't know if you're old enough for card catalogs at the library. It wasn't
Oh, yeah,
internet
yeah,
search.
yeah.
It was literal
Yeah.
index cards, and there was an author, there was a subject, all right, and you would go to the appropriate index card file to find your books. And so he had he had an old 1970s place name. I'm sorry, old 1970s microfilm reader. He got copies of all the microfilm, and he would sit there and read land documents on this 1970, um, old, by no means not quick, automated, new $20,000, $100,000 technology. But he had access to the documents and was able to read them at his home through his purchase of these microfilms. And at that time, I was working on a project at Hawaiian Studies, Kamakuku Okalani, Hawaiian Center for Hawaiian Studies. And from that meeting, I learned that, or through meeting Lloyd, I learned that this isn't about money. It's about sitting down and doing the work. Because here was this gentleman, one person, who in his retirement has this. So he would take a microfilm, read the land document, find the place name, write that place name on an index card, and then go to the USGS map, find it on the map, go to place names Hawaii, find the meaning in place names Hawaii, write it on that card, and other indexes or other land documents that he found were cross-referenced. And so you can find all of this information on Ulukau. It's the part we probably all skip, but it's all kind of in there. And so he has this incredible resource. No money, no grants, no huge team of people, just one man sitting down and doing the work. And at that time, I was working on a project, and we had I think $1 million grant or whatever it was, X $100,000 per year, 10 research assistants. And, arguably one person did, I don't mean this disrespectfully to our project. It's just in terms of what one person can do, right? Without money, without grants, there was no, oh, we need money, oh, we need a grant for this, oh, we should do this, oh, we don't have money. Like, that wasn't the mentality, right? It was go buy the microfilm, sit down and do the work. And so it was from that, for me, I understood it changed my perspective on land research, where it was like, okay, there's no sad stories here. Like, sit down and do the work. You either sit down and do the work or you don't, right? And I know it's not that black and white, but it kind of is also, right? You either sit down and do the work or you don't. And so through his inspiration, seeing what he did, he basically did not all, but nearly all, or a huge majority of the land documents. He purchased microfilm and went through and created his place names index. And so that story, right, just sit down and do the work, was the lesson, or the mea nui from that story for me. And then there was another story from Kamehameha Schools where Bruce Graham, who's a lawyer for one of the large corporate, they represented Kamehameha Schools Bishop Estate at that time, before the 94 Broken Trust. And so Bruce Graham came and gave a presentation to Kamehameha Schools Land Asset Division. And again, no disrespect to Kamehameha Schools, but in my mind, I'm asking the question, how is this knowledge outside of this institution? How is Kamehameha Schools inviting someone from the outside to tell them about their own lands? Right? And again, I don't mean that with any disrespect to any of the people who were there. It's just right? Because Kamehameha schools, they have money. There's no like,
Mm.
oh, you don't have money, like you have a built-in excuse for not having this institutional knowledge. Like if anyone should
Yeah.
have that knowledge, it
It
would be
should be them.
Kamehameha. It should be them because they
Yeah.
have the means
Hmm.
to and so from that meeting or from that presentation, but he was the young lawyer who was doing all the research
Mm.
for that. So he had all the years of research and had that back. He was sitting down and doing the work. Um,
Mm.
and and so 20, 30 years later, now he has that years of accumulation of knowledge and he's in the know, right? Where,
Mm.
to be fair, no one in Kamehameha School's land asset division was getting paid to do that,
Mm.
right? That wasn't what they were supposed to be doing. But then it's also a fair question, right? Like, what if we don't know our own lands? How are we making decisions? If this information is outside of us, outside of our institution, outside of our lahui, then and so the lesson for me from that was I never wanted to be in a room and not be the expert or not know,
Mm.
right? It's like, okay, if I'm in a room, there's never going to be someone from the outside. And I don't mean that egotistically or, from that
Mm.
perspective. It's just from this, we have to know. This knowledge has to come from inside, not outside, right? Talk about the brain drain, everybody
Mm.
leaves Hawaii, right? Like along those lines of like, hey, we got to keep this knowledge here inside. This
Mm.
is ours, our land. We should know. We should be the experts. And so that story, we should be the experts, and it's not about money. It's about knowing what questions to ask and sitting down and doing the work,
Mm.
right? And so that's what got me started on my research. Then I met Dr. Keanu Sai and took a class from him. And to be quite honest, quite frank, I tried to prove him wrong because I didn't understand how one person could have the Mahele correct and the rest of the world have the Mahele wrong, so to speak, right? You talked about narratives, right? There's
Mm.
this narrative here that says Mahele bad, Mahele worst thing for the Hawaiians, Mahele the beginning of the end, and Keanu had this different perspective. And so and you have to think, right? There's hundreds, if not thousands, of intelligent people that have come before him since 1848, right? There's lawyers, there's all of these people that are in this industry, land title research, real estate, lawyers, academics, hundreds, if not thousands of people. How'd they miss it, right? So it didn't make sense how one person could, right? Like, how is something so misunderstood?
Mm.
And then you start digging into the Mahele and it's that misunderstood. And you start to realize why it's misunderstood and that it is misunderstood. And like, oh, wow, we had this wrong. Like,
Mm.
everyone had this wrong. Like, holy smokes. And you start to think about that. And that's a trip in itself, right? How like
Yeah.
a whole entire group of people can have it wrong and no one caught it, so to speak, right? All of these historians, all of these academics, and today we're still fighting this dominant narrative, right? Like it's not over. Since I wrote my master's thesis, it's not done. Like I fight the narrative still to this day. And so it's it's really interesting. So back to the Keanu story, I think the important part about the Keanu story was kind of that in that kind of scientific method kind of framework, there's this idea of verification, right?
Mm.
I should be able to reproduce these are the results and verify that if something is true or not, right? And academia, to be honest, academia doesn't allow, maybe the hard sciences do, but the soft sciences don't allow for, or the social sciences, I should say, don't allow for this verification, this testing of ideas. Let's verify if that theory is true, if that idea is true, right? It doesn't work in the hard sciences. You can test these theories and ideas. That's part of that scientific method. In the social sciences, it's a little less. Like, people don't test or verify. And so what I did was a verification of what Keanu said, what I learned in that class. And because of the way Keanu teaches and his approach, it's very systematic, right? It's that military boom, boom, build a base, build a base, build a base. And just then by the time you're here, it's like you didn't realize how far you got walked, right? But it's that foundation, definition by definition, and that's where I found, interestingly enough, there's definitions that people don't understand about terminology in the Māhele and get definitions wrong. So if we're getting definitions wrong, if we can't define the words and the terms that are in the land documents, how are we going to do anything more advanced, so to speak, if we don't agree on the basics, on the definitions? And to get at those definitions, you have to read tens of thousands of land documents. There is no other way. I can show you examples of words that aren't defined anywhere in secondary sources, right? Chinen does not, the classical go-to for the Māhele does not define these words and these terminologies. And so that's how I got started, was verification. Lloyd Soren, it's not about money. Sit down and do the work. And hey, keep that. That knowledge should be internal to us as a Hawaiian community and not external. Otherwise, I don't mean this literally, but otherwise don't grumble, right? Like, if we're not going to take responsibility for that knowledge ourselves, to know our own things, like, don't grumble when other people know it better than us. And I didn't want to be in a room where someone else knew our land titles better than us. And so that's... And then I guess I would also, I'll add this one, where geography, just kind of the perspective of geography. I think geography, more than other disciplines, allows you to kind of zoom in and scale between perspectives. You can take that 30,000-foot bird's eye view. How do we see this from the airplane level height? Right, where the resolution, you're not going to find a quarter on the ground, but you will see the larger picture and the larger connections and these kinds of things. And then you can zoom in really fine and look through the microscope and look at the cellular levels, metaphorically speaking. And so just that kind of perspective that allowed me to zoom in and out between these different perspectives, I think, was very useful, to see the patterns, but then also to find the definitions. And so those would be the stories that got me started.
No, that's fantastic. The fact that you're talking about definitions, I know just from having my ears to the ground within the Lahui this last decade that a lot of people will talk about the Māhele. And when I took your class, I think one of the definitions really struck me was that definition about allodial title. That was one of my main takeaways, and kind of what did that mean, right? And how did you find out what that meant?
Yeah, going straight into the part of the conversation that's going to get me in trouble here.
Sorry.
No. It's necessary. Um, the Mahele is totally unique to itself. There is no other country, there's no other example in the world that you can look to that has what we have. And so that's where we have to understand the outlier, not the thing on the bell curve,
Mm.
right? This isn't New Zealand, this isn't First Nations Canada, this isn't North America, this isn't South America, this isn't Europe. It's Hawaii. And it's unique to Hawaii. There's no other country in the world that has koinae na kuleana o na kanaka, subject to the rights of native tenants. That's a concept that evolved out of Hawaiian history and how Hawaiian history and other explorers and expansionists who came to Hawaii and interacted with Hawaii, right? And so it's totally unique to this place. With that said, in the university where we are taught to look at things top down. We're law seeking. Give me the theory that I can take this theory to use to explain this place and this place and this place and this place. Right? In the 1950s, they transitioned from, or geography, for example, transitioned from regional studies to trying to be more like the hard sciences and be more law seeking and theory driven, right? All disciplines went through that quantitative revolution in the 1950s and 1960s. And part of that was this de-emphasis on what I'll label bottom up versus top down, right? Ideographic and nomothetic, law seeking versus place specific, right? Do I understand a place and then build my theory, or see how it contributes to theory? Or do I take a theory and use that theory, i.e. colonialism, to explain what happened in Hawaii, what happened in Aotearoa, what happened in, right? So there's already a bias in approach that is going to cause academics to see through a particular lens and a particular way, right? The only way, in my mind, to understand the Mahele is bottom up. You have to read all the 10,000 stories to inform you on and build the understanding of Hawaiian land tenure. You can borrow some. It's useful to understand Blackstone. It's useful to understand this guy on real property and that guy on real property. It's very useful to understand Western private property because that is the model that we are framing this all within, but it's super specific and super unique to Hawaii, right? And this is where we have to bring in 1843, right? Hawaiian history, or our interaction with the West, happens very differently in Hawaii than it does for other brown people, right? For other indigenous people, for other occupied countries, it happens very differently. And for a very long time, we treated it as if it was the same, right? i.e. colonialism explains Hawaii, explains Aotearoa, explains First Nations, explains, right? And 2000, Keanu comes along and says, hey, there's this other perspective, there's occupation. And that is the November 28th, 1843, is that how you deal with Hawaii becoming a recognized country in your analysis. Do you just kind of ignore it, or do you realize, oh, wow, power happened very different here, right? The things that were happening in the rest of the South Pacific did not necessarily happen here in 1843. It looks like it did. You had a white foreigner advisor speaking in the ear of the king, and it looks like Tahiti, and it looks like Aotearoa, and it looks like other places, but then why didn't they also get recognized as countries? Right? And I don't mean that in a value judgment, Hawaii is better than other places. I mean that in Hawaii's history happened differently. And in that difference, right, if we go to academic terminology, what is the thing that you're studying? Right? What is the unit of analysis? What is Hawaii? A country. What is place B? A non-country. So you're going to use a theory for non-countries on a country. Wouldn't happen in the hard sciences, right? You're not going to use a theory that's applicable to mammals, to reptiles necessarily, right? The thing you are studying is different. You're not going to use a theory for classrooms on an individual student, right? The unit of analysis, the thing you're studying is different. And so I don't think we've paid attention or given fair analysis to that part. What is Hawaii, right? And so some have, right? To be fair, more recently we have been, hey, November 28th, 1843 matters. It changes how power happened and who had power in Hawaii, right? And going to my master's thesis, that's kind of the underlying theme there. It wasn't the Māhele, it was loss of governance, right? Loss of governance mattered, where other scholars said, no, it wasn't loss of governance, it was 1840, Hawaii's transition to Western law. 1848, Hawaii's transition to private property. 1820, Christianity, right? It wasn't the overthrow, it was these other things, because that's what colonialism tells us, right? And so all of that, to be fair, I'm coming back to your question, Hawaii is very unique and different and has a very complicated history. There have been stories that framework stories, narratives that were intentionally built, right? Hawaii is based on this three-legged stool. 1887, 1893, 1898. Illegal, illegal, illegal. 1887, bayonet constitution, right? Under duress at threat of life, not a lawful, valid, constitutionally ratified constitution. 1893, the illegal overthrow, right? 1898, the illegal purported annexation, right? Because there is no treaty. So these three illegalities, how do you get something lawful from illegal, illegal, illegal? And this is where the narratives start, right? This is where they have to defame Kalakaua. Oh, he's the merry monarch. He's just this drunk guy. Oh, Lili'u. She was going rogue. She just wanted to make her own constitution. And this is where these narratives start, right? Because you have to break down this illegal, 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 which is the foundation for the state of Hawaii. These three illegalities, right? So how do we get a lawful 1959 from illegal, illegal, illegal? And so this is where the narratives to turn illegal into legal, into lawful, right? And so you have intentional narratives that are started, right? If you go read Thurston and Dole and their memoirs on the
Oh gosh, they're so racist. Sorry.
On the bayonet, they outwardly say this is not a lawful constitution. We needed to do this out of necessity. Like that's their own writing. That's not interpretive. That's them saying this is not a lawful constitution because of circumstance, right? And so narratives are very strong. That adds to our confusion today. The fact that you have to read every single document to build your understanding. I can't just get a quick fix and, oh, I understand Western property law. I understand Hawaii. 60% But there's this really huge thing subject to the rights of native tenants that does not exist in Maine, in Nebraska, in North Dakota, or Florida, right? Like it's specific to Hawaii. And what does that mean in this 50-year period between 1843 and 1893 where we had a lawful government and it's playing out and it's Hawaiian run, right? And so all of this to say the Māhele is very complicated. Back to your question about allodial. If you look at the documents, in the documents, you have documents that are written in English and Hawaiian at that time, right? You take a royal patent grant as an example. Two types of royal patents, a royal patent on a land commission award and a royal patent grant. Royal patent on a land commission award is part of the land commission award process and was evidence of fee simple title. Royal patent grant is the fee simple sale of government land, also evidence of fee simple title, right? So if we talk about the fee simple sale of government lands, royal patent grants, after they overthrow, they cross out the word royal and they write the word land, right? Because they don't want any vestiges towards monarchy because they're trying to get Hawaii incorporated into a republic, right? And that republic separated itself from a monarchy. So we're not going to get Hawaii incorporated into the United States of America as a monarchy, right? And so that's when they changed to a republic. And July 4th, Independence Day, right? We have this podcast. I think today's the 5th, right? The day after American Independence Day. And so that's where all of our land documents are in English and Hawaiian at that time. If you go read, and they're templated, right? You have page 1 is the Hawaiian, page 3 is the English. So you have a quote unquote translation. If you go find the word allodial in a royal patent grant, and you go to the corresponding place in English, it's fee simple. It's fee. You have the fee, right? So allodial means fee simple title, right? There are interpretations out there today that say it's this larger thing. It's this trump card. I won't go into that now. We can go into that later. But allodial is nothing more than fee simple title, right? And you can get that as a matter of definition from the documents themselves. The Kuleana Act is in English and Hawaiian. And if you go read the title and the sections of that act, whenever you see allodial, you're going to see the word fee simple in the English. And so, you know, if we're going to have these conversations, we have to acknowledge those basic kinds of things, right? Like the document itself has the definition, right? And so there's other terms, freehold less than allodial, which is part of this allodial, right? What does freehold less than allodial mean then? And so that is that is actually a really interesting terminology. It's in the template for a royal patent on land commission award. It's in the TypeScript template. It's not the handwritten section. It's in the templated typed out section of these awards. But it's not defined in the award itself, right? And so I was part of a project, AVA Konahiki, Ava Konahiki, Ancestral Visions of Aina. This was also at Hawaiian Studies, Kamakukuokalani Center for Hawaiian Studies. And as part of that project, we full text transcribed all of the land commission awards, all 12,000 land commission awards. We had a group of 10 graduate research assistants, and they typed out every single land commission award so that it could be full text searchable.
Wow.
So this is useful for many things. If you want to know which land commission awards had the word kalo, had the word uwala, had the word you name your plant or your ancestor's name, or, you know, if they weren't the awardee, but they were the neighbor who was next to them or on the side of them, you can search all of those things. Whatever word you want to find, you can search. So this is useful for all, not just legal research, but also for just Hawaiian history in general. And so we took these 12,000 awards, and from that, there's 120 something awards that have the phrase freehold less than allodial in it. So 100 out of 10,000 for easy math, right? There's 11 or 12,000 awards, but 100 out of 10,000, right? And so it's like 1% of 1%, right? 1/1000th of, you don't have a very good chance of finding this term, right? And so that's what I mean about how it's difficult. It's not like it's in 10% of the awards, it's in 100 out of 10,000 awards. And so in those awards, you'll see the phrase freehold less than allodial, or in other words, a life estate. And so a freehold less than allodial is defined as a life estate in these subset, not all 123, but in a subset of this 123 out of 10,000 land commission awards, you have this definition, right? Ironically, if you go to page 10 of John Chinen's The Great Māhele, he has a land commission award that has that phrase, freehold less than allodial, or in other words, a life estate. So it's been sitting in front of all the researchers who have read Chinen. It's been sitting there. He gave us a reproduced copy of a land commission, but he doesn't define that word in any of his books until it comes to They Cried for Help. When he writes his book, They Cried for Help, then he has that word defined in the glossary, but no context, no anything else. And so it's this really interesting, like, people should be confused because secondary sources don't have the definitions. And the only way you're going to get access to these types of things is, did you have post-retirement the ability to read every land document? Were you avoiding 9 to 5 for 10 years of your life and at academia and getting your master's and trying to had the time to read and do nothing but read land documents, right? And so yeah, it's super confusing, it's super unique, but it's also, I think, past that point where we now need to start reconciling and starting to deal with some of these, right? Like, if there's the 1850 Kuleana Act has allodial and then fee simple, we got to account for that if we're going to say allodial means something else, right? And so that's the introduction to allodial and freehold less than allodial, and kind of this, which is all part of this larger royal patent grant narrative that we can get into now or later if you'd like. But there's that's an example of the confusion, and hopefully a lot of context for why such confusion exists, right? Because it's not just what person A thinks versus what person B thinks. It's show me in the documents, right? Like, it's I often make the joke, like, and this is a borrowed joke, but I'm just the mailman, right? We're just delivering the mail. I didn't write the definition, I didn't write the document, I'm just the one delivering it and showing it to you, right? But then I've also taken that 30,000-foot view, read the court cases, read the land documents, transcribed all of the land documents, and started to put together and piece together those patterns, right? Because there's one sentence in a court case that has nothing to do with the court case, but has everything to do with what this term means, or what this gives context to, subject to the rights of native tenants, or explains something. But it's one sentence, But if you haven't made those connections in this larger picture, you're not going to. 5 years ago, I couldn't make that connection, but now 5 years later, I can.
Mm,
Right? And so you could have read it, but it's going to go over your head until you have enough stars in the sky to make the constellations.
mm,
Right? Like if, oh, there's Orion's belt, oh, there's his shoulders, but if 5 of those stars are missing, then it's just a star in the sky. You don't know what to do with it, right? You can't make the connections, you can't see the constellations. And so that's where, again, that ability to zoom out, but also having read all of those things, so you can, oh, that's a star in that. That explains this concept. Oh, that explains this concept. And starting to put those things together.
mm.
So it's complicated. And then you also have to factor in, right? Like after 100 and how many years of occupation? 131?
33.
133?
Mhm.
133 years of occupation, we want results, right?
Mm,
And so, but getting results through state of Hawaii courts is a different perspective than understanding the Māhele. What was the understanding of the Māhele in 1848, in 1858, in 1868? That's different than we've been occupied for 133 years. Now we want something, some justice,
mm.
right? And then seeing it through this lens of justice and wanting results, 100 and all of this eha and all of this hurt through the lens of the state of Hawaii courts, because that's where we're filing these suits to, because that's the occupied governing entity that is the reality. And so all of these filters throw mud in the river to make it harder to understand what was in 1848. I'm just saying they're different questions. I'm not saying one's value judgment better or worse than the other. People get their houses back, that's good. But if we dirty the river for everyone downstream and make things more complicated and more muddy and more murky, then it's also harder to see the truth, right? And so it's just a different question. How was the Māhele understood in 1848 versus how is the Māhele understood in 2026 when we're trying to get something back?
Makes
right?
sense. Yeah.
Right? Like, so even just that idea of like, I'm trying to understand something, to operationalize it, to get something back is kind of different than just, hey, I just want to understand this phenomenon, right? There's going to be you're going to start to see what you want to see because, oh, I can use that. Oh, right? And then those things start filtering other things out. That's just the nature of the beast in that way, right? And so that's lots of complicating factors for why the Māhele is so misunderstood.
Well, you have done your research, and we're all grateful that you built from the bottom up. I know I am. I had the privilege and opportunity to learn from you online, and just the little work that you had us do, and our little sections of the Māhele and typing them out was really insightful for me. And I think one of the biggest takeaways I had was that. And I'm taking an online course with Dr. Ron Williams right now, that the Māhele it wasn't a long process. I think it was like 3 months, if that's right. It wasn't long. And it was basically between Kauikeoli, the king, which I think were the crown lands, right? The Konohiki and the Ali'i, just those three, right? For the most part.
I would refine it a bit, but go ahead, continue.
Yeah, sorry, I'm rudimentary, very rudimentary.
Give yours and then I'll.
Okay, cool. So I don't think it's just hard for me because the main argument out there is, like you said, Māhele bad. But then when I'm looking back and I'm actually reading the Māhele documents, I'm like, I don't see a lot of, there's just not a lot of different Hawaiian names in the document itself. So I'm like, if this disenfranchised all Hawaiian families from land, how come I don't see more names in this? Because it was very, and then when I look at what the government did afterwards with the Land Commission awards and the Royal Patent grants, that I'm like, oh, that's because there was a completely another system from 1848 to 1893 that Hawaiians could acquire land, and that's where most of the Hawaiians today will find their land patents. But we're so focused on hating the Māhele that we don't even know where to look. That maybe we need to look more and then what the difference was between the Land Commission Award and then the patent grant. And I think from my understanding, and this goes back to kind of La Hoʻihoʻi Ea, which we're preparing to celebrate, right? You have this erroneous claim on land by Lord Paulette that someone had verbally given him land. And even before that, you have Kauikeole saying, hey, Aupuni Palapala Ko'u, mine is a nation of literacy at around 13 years old. And how this could have been a vision that he had, for Hawaiians to have the place names documented on paper of where we were, because later he gets overthrown because of this erroneous land dispute with Lord Paulette. And then 1848, 5 years later, he's putting on paper, okay, this is my land from here to there, as crown lands, as the king. Then the Konihiki get this, and the Ali'i get this, and then the Land Commission Awards is like, oh, I've lived here for so long, and then you register to get your award, and then you have a witness, like the neighbor you were talking about, confirm, right, that hey, this was the land, he did live there, and then you get your award, but then you also have to get the survey done, so then it gets and that's honestly one of the things I think is real cool when I took your class, is how accurate the topography were, the lines, with the actual. Could you speak to that a little bit about how accurate the actual drawings and the maps were when you got your land commission award?
Yeah. Let me back up real quick because there was a lot packed in there.
Sorry.
No. So the most unique factor, or the factor that affects Hawaii's transition to private property the most, is 1839 Declaration of Rights, 1840 Constitution, right? So 1839 Declaration of Rights, you basically have the lifting of the Maka'ainana class to be equal to, in some aspects, not all, but under the law, there's no longer a law for this class and a law for that class. Now all people will be treated the same under the law, right? Also for land, previously only Konihiki Ali'i level managed the land, and Maka'ainana level did not, right? 1839 Declaration of Rights says, hey, Maka'ainana, you can now. There are but three classes of persons having vested rights in the land. First, the government. Second, the chiefs. Third, the native tenants, right? So the native tenants get elevated. Their status in society gets elevated to that of land manager, which is going to turn into ownership, right? In 1848. We don't have the concept of ownership in 1839, but we have this raising of the Maka'ainana class to be land managers. There are but three classes having vested rights in the land. This is different than other countries. Go to France. Land, sovereignty of a country, land, real estate, right? All of the land sovereignty of the country belonged to Kamehameha the Great. He was Kana'i Aupuni. All of the real estate, although it was not his own private property, it belonged to the chiefs and people in common, of whom Kamehameha the First was the head, right? And so this is where land, real estate, there are but three classes having rights in land. So now you have this mixed three classes. If we're in France, the king owns all of the real estate, and the king alone, not the king, the nobles, and the peasantry. The king owns the real estate. In Hawaii, there are but three classes having rights in land. Now we got to divide out those rights, and then people will own what is their proportional share. Not equal, proportional, right?
Mm.
Because Hawaii had hierarchy, right? Land of equality, that's an American value. That's an American perspective, right? Power of the people, that's not monarchical, right? Hawaii monarchical form of government, you have class, you have hierarchy. You have the ali'i at the top, you have the ali'i nui, the ali'i kahuna, maka'ainana. There's hierarchy, right? And so it's very different government philosophically, because in America, the government is power of the people. The government derives its power from the people, thus equality, right? And so I think we often look through the lens of American political science, so to speak, because we've been occupied for 133 years.
Right,
We think
right.
that, oh, Hawaii, we should have an equal proportional share in Hawaii also. Like, if you look at through Hawaiian values, no, there's hierarchy. Sorry, right? Like, it's not equal. And so 1839 Declaration of Rights, and that fact that Kamehameha didn't claim to own all of the real estate himself. If he did, then we would just have royal patent grants. We wouldn't need the land commission. We wouldn't need all of these other processes. People would just go buy it from him. But that difference between, and the example that they looked to in Privy Council was Prussia. Prussia. I believe in the 1812s, Prussia, which is now part of Germany, right? Germany consolidated from all of these different entities. And when they said, hey, is there any other example like this in the world? And it was Prussia. And I believe in 1812-ish, Prussia went through a similar thing where they had this concept of undivided rights in land, if you will, where the king didn't own it, the real estate, all by himself. It was shared in this way. And so it wasn't England. And this is what I mean, right? We're not copying England. We're not copying America. We're not, this is them, right? And the Hawaiians' adaptation and taking things that, hey, that's similar to ours, we'll incorporate that. No, that's not similar. We're not going to use that, right? Or that's not applicable here. Yeah, just because that's how they grow kalo in Hana doesn't mean that's how we're going to grow it in Waipio or whatever the case may be, right? That's where you have this place-specific local variations. Gotcha. Right? And that's that bottom up again, right? This place specific. This is how we do it here. This is how we do it here. This is how we do it here. Not this, oh, we all grow kalo, we all grow it the same. No, there are very place specific, regional, ahupua specific ways of doing things, right? Because it depends on climate. Like, go show me the 70 to 100 pie-shaped wedges in Puna. Right, that typical poster of the ahupua, that doesn't exist in Puna, Hawaii. There are there are 70 to 100 ahupua in Puna. You don't have 70 pie-shaped wedges, right? They're learning how to grow uwala in the lava rocks, literally. Right? There's no dirt. If you live in Puna, you know there's no dirt. Right? If you're in Ola'a, yeah. If you're anywhere else, no, there's no dirt. You're in rocks, right? And so they had these very place-specific ways of doing things, and so we took what was similar and we left behind what wasn't, right? And so that's where, when we transition to private property, yes, the framework is Western, but the ideas and concepts that went into that framework are very Hawaiian. All right, we were taking from our traditional system, putting it in this new framework, and that new framework was now this Hawaiian specific version of private property that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. but you have to read thousands of pages of documents to piece that picture together, right? And to get an idea. And I don't say this to be elitist in the sense that, well, if you didn't read the 10,000 documents, you don't know. But if you want to know, that's the process to know, because it's that specific, right? That's the only way. You're not, just because you're an American lawyer, you're not going to understand Hawaiian private property. Just because you're an American real estate agent, that doesn't mean you're going to understand subject to the rights of native tenants. It's different. It's specific to Hawaii. And so that's where, and so can you tell me where we were before I went on my tangent?
No, this is really good. This is really good. I was just trying to clarify.
I know you were talking about the maps, but before the maps and the accuracy of the maps,
Yeah,
it was just kind of, so
'cause I think-
1839 Declaration of Rights.
of rights. So that puts the, because I
That's
think
the foundation.
that's the foundation, right?
There's no Māhele without the 18 without, because that's where rights, you now have rights.
right.
Now we have to Māhele them and divide them. If
Mm,
you weren't given rights, we don't got to divide.
we have
the
nothing to
thing.
divide. Yeah.
Nothing to divide. There's nothing to pull apart and figure out.
Could you
Let,
speak?
let me get
Yeah,
one
yeah.
thing in.
Sure.
too.
Go ahead.
The 1848 Māhele that you were talking about is
Mhm.
both event and process, right? On the one
Got
hand,
it.
it's the 3-month event that you were talking about that took place between, you had mentioned 3 entities. I would say it was just between 1.
Hmm.
And that was the Konehiki class, right? So
Okay.
there are but
Oh,
3
right.
there are but 3 classes having vested rights in the land. First, the government. Second, the chiefs. Third, the native tenants. So the Māhele of 1848 divided out the rights. Oh, let me use a different finger. Divided out the rights of the
Right.
Konehiki class.
Got you.
There's another mechanism that divided out the rights of government. There's a different mechanism that divided out the rights of native tenants. But because these 3 classes have rights in land, the Māhele of 1848 divided out the rights of the Konehikis. So when Kameme III
Hmm.
participates in the Māhele event between January and March 1848, he's participating as the highest ranking chief, not necessarily as the king or representative of government, because there's 3 classes with rights: government, chiefs, people. King is both government and chief. What capacity does he represent? And so in Privy Council, they speak to this and say, in the Māhele of 1848, the king is participating as a chief. So I would say Kauikeoli participated in the event, not King Kamehameha III, because King Kamehameha III is representative of government. Right?
Hmm.
And so that's important, because then you start to understand the Māhele and how things were divided, right? There are 3 classes. The Māhele divided the rights of the Konehiki class. So Kauikeoli and 251 other chiefs divided out their interests. In doing so, that left just 2 classes with interest in land.
Hmm.
Then you have the Kuleana Act, then you have commutation and other factors which divide out the rights of government. But you have to understand this 1839, there's 3 classes, then there's things that divided the rights of each of these classes. And that is that conceptual understanding of the Māhele will help you understand what's the crown lands, government lands, king's lands, land commission, royal patent grants. What is all of this?
Got it.
And
No,
so,
that's really good. That's really good. Yeah. And I guess, if, like you said, there's nowhere else in history that this is happening, right? It's very unique, very exact, and it's all documented, right? You have documents to prove it, where you can put this theory to a process and find evidence of it repeating, right? Like you were saying.
But over hundreds of different sources. There isn't one compiled explanation. There isn't a book I can show you it's this court case has one sentence on this concept, this court case has a paragraph on this concept, and you got to pull all of those stars out of the sky and then make the connection so you can see Orion.
Got it. Got it. Okay. No, that's insightful and helpful, and hopefully for our viewers, this 10,000-foot overview of, the getting a foundation into the Māhele is really important. Could you speak to the benevolence of Kauikeuli as a chief to grant land ownership to native tenants? And, is 1840 different? And because before that, his father, right, Kamehameha was the absolute monarch. So he owned all the land. So before this, from what I understand and what you explained, is there isn't really land ownership of other Hawaiians after everyone unites under Kamehameha. He's the absolute monarch. Kamehameha II, the same. Now we're going in 1839, 1840, and his son decides to do something different.
Yeah. If you want to look at it through the modern day perspective, Kamehameha III should be the poster child for social justice and social justice warriors out there. If people understood Kamehameha III and what he did, he gave up. And this goes back to 1839 and 1840, right? 1839 Declaration of Rights, 1840 Constitution. So that happens before the Māhele, right? So
Right.
even before he gives the Maka'ainana class and others land, he gives them equality in law, right? And it goes back to this hierarchy where you had ali'i nui, ali'i, Maka'ainana, right? And you had this hierarchical structure of society. 1839 Declaration of Rights says all people will be judged the same through the law. There will no longer be different classes and one law for one class and will be treated differently, and one law for another class and who will be treated differently. And I think this has to do with depopulation. I don't think depopulation gets enough analytical, I don't know what the right word is. If you were to ask me, Donovan, what is the one factor that affects this era of Hawaiian history the most? If I had to narrow it to one singular cause, which my brain doesn't, I think it's multifactorial. But if I had to narrow it to one, it's depopulation. If you go from 400,000 people in 1778 as a low estimate to 80,000 people in 1840,
Sheesh.
that's 1/5 of the population that's alive. That's going to change how you structure society, right? You look at what happens to populations after world wars where you lose 10 million people, right? Like that demographic shift, and that within, what's that, 50, 60 years? Right? Within 60 years, you're going from 1/5 of the population, 20%. That means 1 out of 5 people in your family are alive on average.
That's insane.
Right? So if you have a family of 5, there's 1 survivor. That 1 survivor is probably one of the younger ones, because that's who carries on the generation to procreate for those of us alive today. Right? And so who's teaching that 1 child out of 5 that is alive now? Right? Like, who's alive? What mother, father, grandparent, sister, brother is alive, right? And so the demographic collapse that happens between 1778 and 1840, and then between 1840 and 1890, it goes from 80,000 to 40,000.
Sheesh.
It's cut in half in that 40-year period. And this is when the Māhele happens. This is when transition from absolute monarchy to constitutional monarchy happens, right? Back to your Kamehameha III question. This is where he's I think amongst this population collapse, it's, hey, we don't got enough people. We gotta elevate these classes, right?
Mm,
And so I don't think it was all missionary speaking in his ear. I think there's a, like, we all understand demographics. There's not going to be social security in 40 years. The math doesn't work. The demographic math doesn't work. The math's not mathing, right?
mhm,
1778 to 1840, the math doesn't math. You don't have enough people alive and surviving, right?
mm,
To carry on all of this knowledge and all of this tradition. You got one person to carry four other people's knowledge, right? And so, yeah, back to Kamehameha III just quickly, right? 1840, he elevates and he gives up. There's another one or two Niklaus Schweitzer knows the other examples. Lawrence Gonshore might know the other examples in Hawaiian history or in world history. I don't. There are a couple of other examples where a king voluntarily, no war, no civil unrest, where a king voluntarily gives up his absolute power and creates a constitutional monarchy, which then becomes the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and he splits his power. I think this is political because now in an absolute monarchy, you take out the king, you take out the country. In a constitutional monarchy, you take out the king, you take out the executive, but you still have these other branches of government because his powers have now been split and
mm,
divested. So I think it's political strategy so that you take him out and you don't give 100% of the pie away, so to speak. But whatever the reason, he still did it. He gave up all of his power, right? And then that's political, said, hey, people will be treated equal now under the eyes of law. And then you have 1848 and the transition to private property and the elevation of the Maka'ainana class to be land managers, right? Which then turns into ownership. No, in no other time in Hawaiian history were the Maka'ainana land managers,
mm,
right? That was the Konehiki. That was the Ali'i who gave, and then they were
mhm,
land managers in the sense they controlled their little parcel, but they weren't the ones dividing out the pies, handing out the slices. They got a slice and they managed their slice, but they weren't handing out the slices. That was the role of the Konehiki.
mm,
Now they're in a place where they can hand out the slice. Hey, I bought 50 acres. What do? I can hand this 50 acres out now. Blessing and a curse, right? There's research scholarship coming up that's bringing that part of this history to light and saying, hey, yeah, we got land, but we also lost it, right? But that's a different question. Nobody, like, for a very long time, the narrative was Hawaiians didn't get land. Then I
mm.
came along, said Hawaiians got land. Now people are extending off of me and saying, okay, we got it, but we still lost it, which is fair. But it's also a different question, right? It's also there was a narrative that was very strong that you spoke to. And so now we're starting to ask and answer different questions, which is
Mm.
exciting, right? Because it gives a fuller picture of what's going on.
In your perspective, then the Great Māhele was great, right? It was this transition of social justice and equality amongst our people
I would,
by a great king, or
yeah,
maybe that's too basic. I don't know.
no, I wouldn't use the word social justice just because of all the connotations from today. But
Gotcha.
yes, I think the king did a very wonderful thing. He did very political, strategic things. And this is kind of where you have to, there's this logic, which I think is a fallacy. I think it's a logical fallacy. This idea of, oh, but the Mahele opened the door to dispossession. I can open the door, but I still got to step through it. You still got to do something for the causation, right? If we're talking about causation, opening the door doesn't, it allows the dog to run outside, but the dog may or may not run outside, right? So it doesn't satisfy for me the causation part of it, right? If you're gonna say the Mahele did this 100 years later, no, like it's like we're relying on hindsight and presentism to, oh yeah, we don't have land now, so it was that thing that started it that opened the door. Like for me, that's lazy analysis. Like, okay, it opened the door, but nobody walked through that door for 50 years, and or maybe it was the overthrow, or maybe it was this, or maybe or tell me what the other factors were, but don't be lazy and just tell me it was the first event that opened the door, right?
Right, 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 right.
Like do some research, like like prove something, show me something. And so I think Kamehameha the Third gave the greatest gift. I think he was one of, like I said, if social justice people understood Hawaiian history through a different lens, he would be the most celebrated king for all the power. He lifted the people, made them equal in law, gave them access to land, right? And this is the other part of this, right? Like you had a government. Today in the state of Hawaii, all of the large landowners manage Hawaii. In the Mahele, land was the medium through which society, but it wasn't the large landowners who were like, oh no, let's maintain our power. Why'd he give, he had control of 4 million acres. Why is he going to give it all out to take it away? Just keep it in your realm and you have all the power you need, right? And so it's, Kamehameha III should be celebrated for his generosity, for his taking care of people, but he's often vilified for creating private property, right? Which comes from a different place, right? Which is from people who have read and studied Marx and use that theoretical framework to say a means of capital accumulates and it's an inevitable foregone conclusion. That's why we're dispossessed. Okay, but you also had this overthrow thing. You also had 133 years of dispossession. That doesn't have any analysis in how we got here. It's just because the Mahele opened the door, because private property was created. Therefore, the obvious answer or the obvious thing is accumulation of land in the hands of the few. That you had this overthrow thing that took 25% of Hawaii. That's part of the dispossession, right? You have this demographic collapse thing that kills 80,000 to 40,000. We have half the people alive. Who is alive to inherit land that everyone in 1850 bought? Half the people, right? And so the simple narratives are always easier. You can hashtag them. You can put them on a sign. They're easier. But I think it's much more complicated. It's not, I don't think it's a singular thing. I think it's multi-causal, and our ancestors were brilliant observationists, right? The fish that was this large had a name. The fish that was this large had a name. The fish that was this large had a name, right? Same species, different name depending on the growth cycle. There's a difference between a owama and a veke, right? Like we pay all of this attention to this particularities, and for these other cultural things, I wish we would be as strict when we apply it to Hawaiian history and political science, and not just dismiss it. Oh, that's law. Like observation is not law. That's our culture. We paid attention. We paid attention to nuance. Like don't just dismiss it as, oh, that's law.
Hmm.
which a lot of scholars do. It's like, oh, that's the legal guys, right?
Different
Like,
department, right? Not my wheelhouse. No, that's true. Getting back to being exact. Um, now, being being that, when I took Keanu's class, I remember I was taking it and I owned a solar company. I was golfing and out walks the senator. Um, and no, he was the attorney general. So he walks by me and I shake his hand. I'm like, hi, attorney general, blah, blah, blah. I use his name, shake his hand. And then I got on my golf cart and I was like, wasn't my teacher in the permanent court of arbitration? Like, wasn't he a title of something, of a government, of a country? Um, shouldn't I maybe address him as something other than, hey, Keanu, right? You know what I mean? Like, although he's very humble and he prefers that. But I think in my mind, I had to think like, oh, wait, um, governments in exile are a thing for constitutional monarchies. It's in our constitution that after an overthrow of a monarch or death, that, a council of regency is formed. It's literally there for us to read. And here we have a council of regency, and I couldn't wrap my head around that. So I guess I felt my kuleana was, okay, we have this narrative. Obviously, it's not true. Right? There's a lot of holes you can poke through it, right? Like you said, the three-legged stool, right? You have the bayonet, you've got the joint resolution, and 1959 Statehood Act, and you could put all kinds of legs. 1921 Department of Hawaiian Home, like all of these foreign laws in another country, right? And you could just and blow it away with international law, right? Um, so I felt like we were fighting this type of, I don't, almost a war of information, not a war of like physical conflict,
hmm
but more like lawfare and information fair. So I started making, just to start on a foundation of like, hey, Hawaii is an occupied country. At least understand that there's a narrative that people feel Hawaii is an occupied country. Let's just start there, right? No treaty of annexation. So I started creating my own propaganda of little pages that would, and a reason I did that too is when I went to the Maui airport, there was all this propaganda about statehood. Like right when you get off the plane, just all this mural and the timeline. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm being indoctrinated right when I come off the plane. Then you head down the road, and then I think it's King's Cathedral Church. They have all the flags. Um, I don't see the High Hawaii anywhere, or if I do, it's below the American flag. So I'm like, oh, this indoctrination, it's almost like subconscious programming, if that makes sense.
hmm
So to kind of throw it back, if you were to create an image, right, of the Great Māhele to help clear the mud, the like unmuddy the water, right, for our understanding on it, what would it look like?
That is a really interesting question. What image? The metaphor I use in my presentations is of Iolani Palace,
Hmm.
right? And so if you look at Iolani Palace on the outside, it looks very European,
Hmm.
right? Like if you didn't know it was Iolani Palace, you might
Right, right.
assume it's somewhere in Europe, right? But on the inside, and Stacy Kamahiro has an article or a chapter on this and kind of did this analysis of the architecture of the palace, right? So like you also there was a former heiau on that premises or nearby,
Hmm.
and a pohaku from that heiau was used as the
Hmm.
cornerstone for the foundation of Iolani Palace,
Wow.
right? If you think about that just for a second,
Hmm.
if we did anything like that today, it would be considered desecration.
Mm.
right? If we took something existing and brought it into the new and brought that mana, and that mana was then incorporated and part of this new continuation in this new form, that would be desecration.
Mm.
Hawaiians would be up in arms if pohaku, and rightfully so on the one
Mhm.
hand, but also like, how does culture evolve,
Mm.
right? Like, how do we go from old to new, and when is it allowable and when is it not, right? And so Iolani Palace on the outside looks very Western. Private property, very Western on the outside. You look on the inside, very Hawaiian. You don't
Mm.
have oak floors, you have koa floors. You don't have American motifs, you have kalo, you have kukui, you have all in the baseboards, in the sideboards, and all of this. You have all of this Hawaiian symbology and this Hawaiian,
Mm.
right? And that reverses the assimilation metaphor, right? The assimilation metaphor is your Western, your white on the, or you're red on the outside, you're white on the inside. You have assimilated into Western culture, you have become Western. Your interior is white, although your skin is still brown,
Mm.
right? Brown, white, coconut. Red, white interior, apple. Black, white, Oreo, right? All of these derogatory terms for assimilation. Yes, you have the ethnicity of a Hawaiian, you have the brown skin of a Hawaiian, but your insides have assimilated into Western culture, and you're white on the inside. You're a coconut, right? And so all of these different terms that have been used for these different cultures are this assimilation metaphor,
Mm.
right? Iolani Palace reverses that metaphor. Because on the inside, we are Hawaiian. All the Hawaiian motifs, koa floors, all of that. And on the outside, looks Western, looks European, but the inside, we're preserved, right? But hey, we can play this international law game. We can play this royal estate and have this symbol of nationhood, right? We can satisfy the outside while on the inside maintaining who we are as a people,
Mm.
right? And so my image would be something along those lines, getting at that metaphor where if you look at how private property transformed, it's very Hawaiian on the inside. We took things that were Hawaiian. That's the structure. That's why we have all the court cases and all the rights and the
Mm.
access to
Right,
the
right, right, right.
beaches and everything we have today, because our laws were in effect and preserved those.
Mm.
On the outside, it looks like Western private property. On the inside, it's Hawaii's version of Western private property. So it would be my image would be something off of that metaphor of
Mm.
Hawaiian on the inside and, this thing
Right,
that
right.
looks Western on the outside.
No, it's a beautiful metaphor.
And
Um, I think just to kind of speak to this, because I've in Iolani Palace, it's not like you can sit on the throne. It's usually roped off. But at the Palace Hotel, there were replicas of the throne in San Francisco, and I looked closer, and there it was, the kalo. Yeah, the leaf um, etched into the wood. So I really like that analogy. Um,
yeah, I have a friend who took a picture sitting on the rep on in the San
oh,
Fran
yeah, yeah. No, it's
hotel.
um, okay. Along those lines, then let's go deeper into this. Then, so it's Hawaiian on the inside. The first thing when I'm trying to use that paradigm shift was, I believe, and you can correct me when I'm wrong, or if the Land Commission Award, I believe you had to get a witness, right? to verify before you got the award that you owned it. So that's very Hawaiian because you're talking to a neighbor and it's an oral tradition, right? And you're just bringing the oral into the written, right? And that process is, I would say, along the lines of our oral traditions. But that's kind of where it stops for me. I don't know very much, and you've read so many documents and court cases. What maybe what example, particularly for the Mahele, did you really like? You say, wow, this is Polynesian, right? This is a very Hawaiian cultural practice. In a court case or something you've read.
Very good question. So one of the articles, going back to one of my original stories, Bruce Graham wrote an article in Boundary Law in Hawaii. That's a little publication talking about for legal people and surveyors. And in Boundary Law in Hawaii, so in geography to very overly simplify it, one time geography was like the study of colonialism, right? It was the study of these kinds of things, to highly simplify the discipline. And so in taking geography courses, there's a checklist, so to speak, the colonial checklist. This happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, right? And you can see that in our scholarship. 1840, transition to Western law, right? That's Osorio, dismembering Lahui. 1848, transition to private property. That's Kame'elehiva, native land, foreign desires, right? Sally Mary, colonization of Hawaii. Hawaii's 1820, Hawaii's transition to Christianity, right? There are these things that happen, right? And so one of the things that happens in colonized countries, and you can go read the books, Siam mapped, right? How Siam gets mapped, and through this mapping technology is how these places become legible, and through that legibility, you now have the creation of private property, and then you now have the selling and dispersal of that property, right? Boundary markers for New Zealand, talking about how New Zealand gets mapped, right? There's a Maori. This was a very long time ago that I saw this interview, but there was a Maori, I believe he was in Parliament, in a member of government, also highly respected in the Maori community, right? And he's telling this story, or maybe it was at Kamehameha. Anyway, I saw a Maori person high in government giving a presentation, and he talked about how when he goes to England, he feels at home. And I'm like, took me back. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he goes, yeah, there are portions of New Zealand that were literally created in England's likeness, down to the street names and the place names and right? It was like, oh, take England and rubber stamp,
Right, right.
and all the place names and all the street names and all of these things, it was created in England's likeness, right? And then I was like, oh, I was like, you feel at home. Like I go anywhere outside of Hawaii and I'm like, get me home. I'm not comfortable in this place, right? If I go to Arizona, I'm like, where's the mountains? I need Mauka Makai. Like north, south, east, west doesn't do it for me. I don't know where I'm at here, right? And so it's, and then you look at Hawaii, and so like the most obvious one was like the first thing that happens in colonized countries is they map the place. The colonizer maps the colonized. Didn't happen in Hawaii. Our private property goes back to the Māhele book, to bring this conversation back to the
we're doing
Māhele.
the mapping.
And the mapping is our traditional place names.
Oh my gosh.
You go look at the Māhele book. It's a list of place names that are all Hawaiian Ahupua'a. Why did they, if the missionaries were in control, why did they use our place names to map the thing? They didn't do that in New Zealand. They used their mother country, England. They didn't do that in First Nations, they didn't do that. You name your colonized country, they didn't do that. The colonizer came and imprinted themselves on the landscape through place names and through how they were mapped and organized. And then you have private property. And this goes back to that story of, oh, I need a copy of the Māhele book, right? And then I go and get this copy of the Māhele book and I'm reading this typescript thing and it's all Hawaiian place names.
Wow.
Right. And so that the Māhele book and the fact Hawaii was not mapped. When it created private property, Hawaii is, I don't know if any of, if we were to do the Māhele today, we would make a map. What did they do in 1848? Wrote down in a book a list of place names.
Wow.
Hundreds of place names, thousands of place names. And that was their inventory of how we started to create private property. Was this list of place names. Why? Because everybody alive at that time knew where Kailua was. Yours is Kailua, where yours is Waimanalo. Waimanalo, Kailua, Kaneohe, He'eia, Kahalu'u, right? Like they knew where things were and what things were relative and who was the neighbor to who. And the people on the ground knew the boundaries. So we didn't have to, the pie was already, the pizza was already cut. We just handed out slices, right? Here's Kailua, here's your Kaneohe slice, here's your He'eia slice, here's your Kahalu'u slice, right? We weren't sitting there, oh, I'd really like more pepperoni. Can you make it bigger and I can get this cut with more pepperoni? I want less olives.
Right.
The pieces were already known, which is why they could transition to private property in a book by place name only. So geography tells me in colonized situations, colonizers map the colonized. Didn't happen in Hawaii, right? And so this is back to Bruce Graham's article, and he's talking about this, right? He's talking about all these different things. Well, he's not talking about this specifically, but he's giving examples. One of the examples was, right, even today, the surveyor's map governs. That's the authority in court. Hawaiian Kingdom, that survey was only admissible to the degree that it was representative of the Kama'aina testimony. The Kama'aina is the authority, not the line on the map. In colonized places, the line on the map is the line.
The authority. Wow.
This is where I had friends who, like somebody arbitrarily, I believe it was in Yugoslavia, right? Half of her kitchen was in one country and the other half of her kitchen was in another country because someone arbitrarily drew a line
through the house
on a map.
And
then that line on the map was the line. We couldn't use common sense to move it so it's not splitting my kitchen, right? Like,
right.
But that was didn't happen in Hawaii. So like, there's this. Okay, here's this colonial checklist. Didn't happen. Looks like colonization in the way my brain works.
Right.
If you're going to tell me these are the 5 things that happens to colonized countries and 4 out of those 5 things didn't happen,
something else happened.
It didn't happen.
Right. Yeah, it didn't happen.
Right. And so then something else happened. Right. And this is the same time I'm taking classes with Keanu. And then there's this, occupation. We had more power. Okay. And so that's that's
powerful.
Geography and my kind of the way my brain worked at that time, and just like, okay, here's the checklist. None of the checklists happened. Then it was very easy for me to dismiss and say, well, the whole thing didn't happen. Then something else happened. Whereas other people will hold on to that one thing and say, no, but we're still colonized. That's where I go back to the units of analysis. What is Hawaii? You're going to apply a theory for a non-country onto a country?
To a country, yeah.
What is the thing we're studying?
Mm.
What is Hawaii? It looks, after 1893, I can see how colonization looks to have happened. I don't mean legal colonization, but I mean the conceptual things that happen to language and all of those kinds of things happen in Hawaii. But there's also occupation language that explains, right? You have the Germanization of Poland, which explains the language loss and the ethnic cleansing and the assimilation into German culture, right? Like, so there's also language that from occupation that can also explain that same kind of phenomenon. If I'm being honest, I think we're just lazy with our observation. We don't. A fish is a fish. We're not no longer differentiating between Oama and Veke. It's a fish. A fish is a fish. Colonization is colonization, and I think it's lazy. I think our ancestors were much more. It would, right, like Hawaiian language.
Yeah.
Hawaiian language. I don't know how many different words. 70 different words for carrying something.
Oh.
Right? Like you can carry something on a stick over your shoulder. You can hop high something like you do a baby. If I'm hop highing something with my hands, I don't have access to my hands. If I'm carrying something like a backpack, I can use my hands and defend myself still. Right? So you can fall, right? There's different words for falling. Did I fall off a horse? Or did I fall and slip and fall? Or those are all different kinds of falls. Right. So like it's not just one, oh, you fell and it's one word. Right. There's all this nuance. But then when it comes to Hawaiian history and Hawaiian politics, then it's like, we'll get. Now we can generalize. Now there's one word for carry. Now there's one word for fall. Like, now there's one word for fish. Now everything is like ia. Like,
and I'm just going to say this to my viewers. If you haven't noticed, and I'm just going to kind of emphasize this, that Professor Donovan Preza is, I think you've said, reading 10,000 documents at least 3 to 5 times. And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe this is just the paradigm, and back to the idea that of denationalization, right? So if you're trying to denationalize a country that's known for being hardworking, I mean, we were the most literate country in the 19th century. No one can take that fact away from us now. We're just discovering it or rediscovering it, but it's still a fact. It's true. It holds true. And my former podcast with Dr. Umi Perkins, I said, well, weren't we second to Scotland? And then he corrected me as well. Scotland's not technically a country. It's part of the United Kingdom, right? I was like, oh yeah, right? But getting that exact, and now I can say exact, we were the most literate country in the 19th century. And yesterday was 4th of July, and we see, patriotism, right? With Americans being so proud of their achievements as a country. And I'm thinking, that makes me proud to be Hawaiian, right? And you don't get literate by not reading, right? You have to read 10,000 pages to gain a fluency within whatever you're the expert in, right? So when I took the class with Dr. Ron Williams, he said probably 4 or 5 times too. And the expert on this subject was Professor Donovan Preza. So just know that your name came up as expert. And I think the audience would be, I think they need to be enlightened to the fact of, and I know I'm kind of going on a tangent, but the difference between the Public Law 103-150 and that apology, and very unspecific, right? You have this apology bill from Bill Clinton, and a joint resolution is synonymous with a bill, and it's authored by Bill Clinton. So you got Bill Clinton's bill apologizing for our country, and he doesn't even get the name of the country right. Right. So I was thinking, like, if I was dating a girl and I apologized for something I did, and her name was Becky, and I said, "I'm sorry, Mary," right? Doesn't even name the subjects of our country correctly, right? Calls us natives, Hawaiians, doesn't call us Kupa, Kanaka, or Hawaiian subjects, Aupuni, Hawaii, the Kingdom of Hawaii, or Hawaiian Kingdom. They say the Kingdom of Hawaii, right? So we don't know the name of our country. We don't know the name of what our country called us in our country. To me, the more I just whittle it down, and maybe had this observation when you took Keanu's class too. It's like, yeah, we're the Polish. We're the denationalized, right? We had this whole nation and understanding of it, and where did it go? So I think by reclaiming the fact that we were these hard-working observers of our almost science, I would say almost scientific in a way, is, we observe our natural surroundings, our physical surroundings, and we find ways to be exact with them and to communicate in exact language and to get back the exact understanding of our national consciousness. And that's the goal of this podcast, is how do we get back to precision, right? Like when we talk about the 28,658 figure, you probably hear time and time again when talking about the Māhele that, only the native Hawaiians receive 28,658 acres. Where does that number come from? And why do you argue that this number only tells like the small part of the story, this part of the fish?
Yeah, so the problem, so to speak, with that statistic is that it's factually true. It's factually accurate, but it's not the truth, capital T. It's not the whole story.
Native Hawaiian, lowercase n, capital N, right?
Or we'll get into the native
No,
native thing
I'll
after.
get that.
But
Right.
like, it's a fact that
Hmm.
Hawaiians got 28,000 acres via the Kuleana Act. That's a fact. It's true.
Mhm.
The metaphor I use to explain this is that's one bedroom of the house. That's only one factor or one way where Hawaiians got land, right? And this is where you have to pay attention, because you have to be clear with what question you're asking.
Okay.
So if the question we're asking is, did Hawaiians get land? Then that is one bedroom in this multi-bedroom home. For a very long time, that's the only bedroom with the light on. That's the only thing we were conscious of. That's the fact that Mary and Kelly, Mary and Kelly is kind of the beginning of this genealogy for a lot of the Hawaiian scholars, right? She had in her a lot of her early articles, she uses the word genocide to describe the Māhele, right? The Māhele is genocide, right? And it's based on this one statistic. And so if you take 28,000 acres and you divide it by approximately 4 million acres of the total land area of Hawaii, it's less than 1% of the land. So if you're looking at that, the Makaʻe Nana only got 1% of the land. That looks very bad. It looks, right? And so it's true via that mechanism, and then this is where academia comes in, right? Like she's heavily influenced by Marx, right? So you have this theoretical framework, Marxism, and then you take Marxism and you look at Hawaii, and we have class structure. We have ali'i, nui, ali'i, makaʻe nana. We have the proletariat and the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. We have that class structure, and then you put this 1% factor in it, and it looks like the elites at the top took from the people at the bottom, and it looks but how much of that is driven by the narrative and the theory, right? Because that's what this theory says is happening, and it looks like it's what is happening, but if you dig deeper, it's not that simple, right? And so this is where kind of that top-down approach of taking these theoretical frameworks and applying them to Hawaii. If what is the thing you're studying, right? Like
Right.
from this same person who elevated the bottom class to be equal to the top class, made the guys who weren't equal in law, made the guys who couldn't
Right.
be
Yeah.
land managers. Make that part of your Marxist analysis also, and tell me how that
Mm,
is factors into this Marxist analysis, because that's also
right.
part of the story,
And the
that there's
population
this elevation
right.
of the lower class.
Hmm.
But we're going to shine the light on 28,000 acres and
Hmm.
ignore the rest of that because it.
Well, I'm a math major, so in my head, I can, like you said, the population was something we really have to highlight too. In 1850s, we're about 80,000, right? Probably population at that time. Divided by 28,658 is 0.35 or 35%. That's still larger than a quarter acre, right? Per every Hawaiian alive at the time. That's actually, I mean, you could buy a house with a quarter acre lot and be happy about it, right? So if you factor in the population into that, it's actually not a bad figure. But anyways, I just, like you
Yeah,
said,
no,
it's a,
there's lots of ways to look at it
to look
that,
at it, right?
but if you're looking at it from Mahele bad,
You'll never
and
do the math, right?
you're
Yeah,
not going to look at things that don't tell you Mahele bad. You're only
right.
going to pick the evidence that says Mahele bad. And so this is where kind of that bottom up approach
Mm,
also, where you're let the stories
come
tell
from the
you
evidence. Yeah,
what the
right, right, right,
story is, not
right.
have a predetermined
Mm,
narrative that then drives the story, because then
mm,
you're going to choose evidence that fits the narrative and
makes
you're going to
sense.
ignore other stuff, right? It's human nature. We that
Right.
once you have a perspective, your subconscious finds things that reify that
Yeah.
perspective.
Confirmation bias, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so it's like just being aware of that, back to your
Mm,
previous question of how do we like help our people? It's like just be aware of like these biases. Like it's
mm,
these biases in thinking, and it's it's difficult because
mm,
for us to change the narrative, we have to do the difficult task of having the long story, right? I don't know how
mm.
many hours we're into this podcast, but this is what it takes to get that. There is no hashtag, go put it on a sign, and
Right. Yeah.
where
True.
there are hashtags for the simple stories,
Hmm.
right? Because they're simple. We can distill it down to one word, and but here it's like we need 2 hours to even take a small chip away, because it's this big tangled package that we
Mm.
gotta untangle every single piece, and not everybody has the time for that, and it takes, like, how long have you been studying this? How many
Oh my
hours have
gosh.
you put into it,
Decades.
right?
Yeah.
And so like other people would have to put in similar amounts of times to get to the level of your consciousness, and where you started and where
Mm.
you are today, and how many hundreds or thousands of hours that took. And so, and then it's also like, who are you exposed to? Who do you have access to? Can you call Donovan up and ask him a quick question, or take a
Right.
class from
Yeah.
him? And if you
Right.
can't,
Right.
then
How are you gonna learn it? Yeah.
how are you gonna learn it? Or how are you gonna like make those leaps that, some of those leaps are like, oh, that saved me 7 weeks. Like,
Oh yeah. No. Yeah. Just because yeah, if you don't know where to dig, you could just be, you know, shoveling away for the rest of your life. And by having you as a resource, which I find myself very, very fortunate. The idea is to have these conversations in public, right? Because we've had conversations like this in the past. Um, Maybe not as long, right? But um, I I really do appreciate getting back to that. But I kind of want to mention something before I forget, and that's the back to the apology bill thing, right? Apologizes, broad brush strokes, so doesn't get our history right. It's apologizing to a wrong name, all of that stuff. Doesn't really do anything afterwards, too. It's like after the apology bill, what happened? How did our condition improve? It really didn't. I'm being critical, but I don't really see something that drastically changes for our people. We're still, number one in obesity and first to get incarcerated, all those things. But when the United Church of Christ apologized, not only do they not use the word annexation and their role in the annexation, they say occupation, right? So now they changed the narrative. And I believe you were a guest along with, I believe, Ron Williams, Dr. Keanu Sai. I think you had a 4-part series. So for the viewers, I'm going to include the 4 videos and to do a deeper dive, because even though we spent a lot of time on this, you really have to see the PowerPoint presentation that Donovan does, that he really breaks down the specifics, lays the foundation. And I'd say that's a really good starting point. But hats off to the United Church of Christ for actually not only apologizing, but creating a platform because I think education is a form of reparation, right? I mean, if you're really sorry about it, explain what really happened, right? Like, that's the least you could do. If you stole my house, tell me why, tell me when, right?
Yeah.
Tell me that it wasn't a 1-bedroom room with a light on, right?
Yeah.
So, so I want to lead the viewers to that as a resource.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely a complicated topic. Those 4 videos are 1-hour videos, and each of those videos we could have a 10, 20, 40-hour conversation on the specifics of different things. It's meant to be an introduction, but it's also, since it's so complicated, it's also a lot of information packed. It's very dense, but I think it's also presented in a way that is accessible, but it's also dense because you need to know Hawaiian history, you need to know Western property law, you need to know, and it's a complicated topic, right? Like it's that. Back to your comment about me being an expert, even if I am an expert, I would implore your listeners to verify, right? That same way I verified what I was taught. You have to take something at surface value, at face value. Otherwise, you're just going to spin your wheels verifying every single thing, and you're never going to get anywhere, right? So there is you have to trust, that idea, trust, but verify, right? While I'm speaking, you can take what I say at face value, but verify everything I say. Also, don't take it at face value, right? Take it at face value, but don't take it at face value, right? Like we I think in Hawaiian culture we have this, oh, that's the kumuhula and they said it, so we're not going to challenge.
Right.
But go look at the Hawaiian language newspapers. They beefed all the time. There was no, oh, just because somebody said it, it was true. They're beefing about everything, right? There's this verification also, and this holding to accountability. And so you got to trust someone, but also have that thing where you're verifying. And the more you verify, the more you're going to get your own sense for who you can trust more, who is more consistent, who is less consistent, who has the receipts to back things up. And then that will build your own, not, oh, my friend said, so I'm going to trust him.
Right.
We have to get to the point where we also build that for ourselves. No, I've done some work. I've verified what he said this. I went and looked it up. Yeah, that document says that.
I checked
out.
Yeah,
that is on page 10 of Chinen. There is a Land Commission award with the word freehold less than allodial. And it does say, or in other words, a life estate. Like, go verify those. It's not hard, but I think culturally we often just accept authority sometimes, and sometimes you got to verify. I find it a compliment when you verify what I said, because then it's, oh, you're doing your kuleana, you're doing your due diligence. You're not just a parrot repeating what I said.
And that brought a thought to mind. for our listeners, when he says to go check it out, verify in the nupepa, the newspapers, the Hawaiian language newspapers, they were beefing all the time. And it's funny too, because some of the newspapers were called, like, I guess there's a newspaper called La Ku'okoa, right? Which is the Independence Day, or Ku'okoa, or something like the Independence, right? So you have this newspaper called Ku'okoa. People know they have Ku'okoa, but yet in the Hawaiian Kingdom, there were different political parties, and not everyone agreed. Not everybody agreed with the king, right? You had Navahi talking about, giving the reciprocity treaty in Pearl Harbor, and speaking in the House of Nobles and saying, no, not a good idea, right? Um, but I think this is important because I want to take that and dispel the myth that all Hawaiians have to think the same. All Hawaiians have to sort of unify. There's just so much self-blame in the lahui that I think is so hurtful to us as a people, where we are forced to be this unified, and maybe for some things, like I know we unified for the petition against annexation. That's proof, right? No matter, because there's the Lipelala party, there were different political parties in the Hawaiian Kingdom, but all different political ideologies. When 1898 was coming, and the session to ratify the Treaty of Annexation came, our kopuna, 38,000 signatures, we can conclude on the same page, literally on the same page, protects our ea. But then you have newspapers called the Independents, and they're beefing in the Independents, because I think diversity was the strength of our country. And to have electricity in the lighthouse, you need an electrician to put it there, right? And you want an electrician to put it there so it doesn't burn down, right? You want Hawaiians that specialize. So this is an encouragement for all Hawaiians out there, that whatever you do, whatever type of music you listen to, whatever, just try to be the best at what you do, and try to be precise. And let's get back that precision and hardworking nature that existed prior to the occupation of 1893. I think that's the biggest message that I'm hearing, but I don't know. I hear different things. So
Yeah, no, and for me, it's that top down, bottom up, that place specific, right? Like
mhm.
we all grew kalo, but there wasn't one correct
Mm,
way to grow kalo. Some
right.
people grew mounds, some people dug holes, some people threw it in the rocks. Like there's
Hmm.
place specific variations, but we all grew kalo.
Right.
So
Right.
where do we all agree? Growing kalo. How to
How?
grow kalo? Place specific. Hana
Mm,
grows kalo different than
right.
Wailuku, different than Waipio, different than Puna. Like there are
Mm,
place specific, but they all grew kalo,
right.
right? We all agreed we would rather eat rocks, but we still disagree on these specific things, right?
Hmm.
And so I think I also don't agree with that.
Mm,
I think it's a tactic of division, that idea
mm,
of unity. Unity at the level of, hey, we all kalo is important. Yeah. You're gonna tell me there's one. Uncle Jerry Konanui has a video on YouTube about this where he talks about the super kalo and this
mm,
one breed of kalo that grows everywhere, right?
mhm,
These Hilo scientists were trying to find one kalo that grows everywhere. And he's like, we don't need that. We get
mm,
the one that grows in the salt water. We get the one that grows in the high wind. We get the
mm,
one. If you know the different varieties of kalo, you know which variety can grow where. If you know like your kalo tear, then hey, maybe you go with a pico variety because it's more
mm,
aerodynamic. Or you go with one of
mm,
the kai varieties if you're next to salt water, right? Like
mm,
but it's that knowledge of the specific species of kalo, but it's all kalo, but the specific variation and species of
mm,
kalo, right? And so we don't, that universal one theoretical thing that
Was
the
the
one
reason for
column.
our demise, right? Because we didn't do
Well,
this one thing, and that's why it all fell apart. Which
yeah,
is
it's
so
like
weird.
that's where I think that kind of variation and
Mm,
diversity, and it's like there's, he talks about this one variety of kalo that grows in the desert of Ka'u.
hmm
No other kalo will grow there. And he says, like, hey, if you're in Ka'u, this variety is not wasteful. This is the
mm,
variety. It's the one that grows here. Like, you go
right,
try
right.
grow these other varieties. But then
Mm,
people in other places don't want it because it's small,
I
right? So you
see.
don't want little poundage when you can get a kalo that's 5 pounds versus one that's 1 pound. Yeah, I
Right.
want the 5 pound variety. So, but if you're in Ka'u, you want the one that grows in Ka'u, right?
hmm
And so this is where kind of that local knowledge and that specific knowledge and that place specific rather than, hey, the super kalo, we just need one. We don't need 30. We need
mm,
or 100. We need one. And it's
yeah, yeah.
I there's so many examples in these other places that it's I I think Hawaiians were very place specific, and unfortunately that's the paradigm that gets erased in academia because it's very law seeking. And
Mm,
so um that yeah, there's
no,
I don't know
yeah.
that that helps us in that way.
I feel like because I was raised on the Moku Okeawe, so Big Island, and I mean, you drive 10 minutes down the road, you're in a different climate, right? 10 more minutes,
Yep.
you're in a different climate. I think it had, and I could be wrong, but it's like 11 to 10 different climates of the world's total 13 or 14. I can't remember the
Yep.
exact
Yep.
numbers. So possibly I'm thinking like with that kind of mind frame, maybe that's why I had 250 konoikis, right? They had the konoiki that understood this ahua, what grew there, how to take care of it, how to take care of the people there, right? And maybe that's why those place names were important. So do you do you remember reading some of the place names that maybe that spoke to a variety of kalo that grew in an area, or maybe a chief or a battle, or why were the place names so uniquely Hawaiian?
Oh, Hawaiian place names are so interesting, right? Like because most of them are descriptive, right? So
Hmm.
within that description, I think are built in what Western science would call taxonomies,
What is that?
right? Taxonomies,
Taxon.
where
Okay, okay.
there's
Yeah,
different categorizations
yeah.
and
Hmm.
classifications, right? Like there's Haena on multiple different islands.
Hmm.
Is there a reason? Do they share characteristics? Or is
Hmm.
that coincidence? Right? And I think what you'll find is there's more reason because all of these place names are so specific and place specific. It's not just George. Why? Put my finger on a name in a book,
Right, right.
right? Like it's a descriptive language, right? And so Mauna Kea, white snow, the
Mm-hmm.
one with the snow, Mauna Loa, the big broad one, right? Like,
Hmm.
and through that description, you get these classifications and these taxonomies. And I think that that specificness was part of our culture and part of our language. It wasn't just random.
Mm.
Um, back to let me just throw this out there for the importance of place names, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I showed your viewers a map of the continental United States, everybody would know how many states should be on a map of the continental United States. How many?
49. No?
49 with Alaska, 48 if the map is just of, or
Oh, right.
the
48. Yeah, correct.
contiguous United States.
Right.
Free shipping to the contiguous
Oh, yeah.
states, it
Alaska
would
pay
be
extra.
right?
Right,
Alaska and
yeah.
Hawaii, you guys are further away. You're going to pay extra, right? So
Yeah.
we can debate Alaska, but contiguous United States, 48 states, right? If I showed you a map with 24 states on it, you would know intuitively that there is a problem, right? You erased Montana and made it part of Idaho and Washington. Now Washington is this big, now it's that big, right? You would know that doesn't look right, right? If I showed you a map of Hawaii Island, how many ahupua'a are supposed to be on that map?
I wouldn't even know.
I don't know any human being that knows the answer to that question.
Wow.
So at that fundamental level, we do not know the most basic question that starts all of this land thing.
Wow.
Right? We don't know how many ahupua'a are supposed to be on that map. I just told you earlier in this conversation that the Māhele book is a list of place names. There is no map. Hawaii was not mapped in 1848. Back to your other question, yes, maps were made, and those maps were internally accurate, right? The boundaries were accurate. This is 4 inches by 1.5 inches, and this is my kuleana. That was internally accurate to itself. What was not accurate was we didn't have a system to say that this kuleana belongs here and not there. Or there, or there, or there, or there, right? So the maps from the kuleanas in the 1850s were internally accurate, and there were surveyors who were more or less accurate. But to generalize, they were accurate in and of themselves. One surveyor used a chain that was this long, another surveyor may have used a chain that was longer, and you would need to know that. So they're not necessarily between surveys, not accurate in that sense, but internally, for the most part, very accurate, right? But we didn't have a system that placed this corner belongs right there, not right there.
Makes sense.
Because we had a book of place names. So what happens if I erase 20 of those place names? Land title's gone. Now you have a map with, instead of 48 states, now you have a map with 40. Erase a couple more, now I have a map with 30. Erase a couple more, now I have a map with 22. Now, this landowner is now this landowner, and nobody knows the difference. The guy owns this much today, but it really should be this much. And we don't know, because we don't know how many ahupua'a are supposed to be on that map. Because we don't know our place names. We could know our place names. They're all written in the Māhele book. We could go find every place name for Hawaii Island, every place name for Maui, every place name, and get a starting figure, and then add another resource, add another resource, add another resource, and get close to that 48 number, right? But if we don't know, we don't know. This would be like not knowing the opening balance to your checking account, right? If I'm going to do an audit of my checking account, I need debits, I need credits. Most importantly, I need opening balance. We don't know the opening balance. So whatever was sold, whatever was bought, we can track the debits and credits. What we don't have is the opening balance. How many ahupua'a are supposed to be on that map? Then when an entity shows you a map that has 70% of those ahupua'a, you can say, get that out. You're missing 30% of the ahupua'a. Because each of those ahupua'a names is land title.
Interesting.
So if you don't know place names, you lose land title. That's how important place names are in Hawaii, because we weren't mapped the way other colonies were mapped. Because we weren't a colony, because we were an independent state that partook of private property on its own and used its own traditional system as the basis for that. They didn't bring public land survey system, township and range. I own the northeast corner of the southwest corner of the northeast corner of this township of this range, right? That's America. They didn't bring that here. Why not? That's the mapping system in America. If we were colonized by these missionaries, they should have used their system and imprinted it on us, as they did in New Zealand, as they did in India, as they did in you name your colonized country. We weren't colonized, so it didn't happen that way. It happened, but it happened our way, au revoir. Right? And so that's where 1843, who's in charge, who has power, and so this is, brings us back to Kamehameha III and the petitions, right? There's petitions from Lahaina, petitions from different people in early 1840s saying, hey, King, why do we have so many foreigners in government? And that's the voice of the Maka'inana, and many, many scholars have shined the light on that voice, right? This comes from that proletariat bourgeoisie dynamic where, hey, we're not going to give voice to the people, to the bourgeoisie, we're going to give a voice to the people. And so the voice that gets shined on and gets elaborated on is these Maka'inana petitions and what they're saying. And I'm not saying that's not important. I'm just saying that's half the story. Right? The other half of the story is, hey, what did our king say in reaction to that? But we don't look at that because he's part of the top and he's part of the guys who got land, and he didn't give land in that narrative to these people, right? And so in these petitions, hey, king, why do we have so many foreigners? Well, what's the problem that's being identified there? Too many foreigners in government. What then is the obvious solution? Get the foreigners out of government. Haole go home. Right? If the problem is too many foreigners in government, what's the solution? Get foreigners out of government. Not very far from Haole go home. Right? Foreigner go home. That's if you identify that as the problem from that mo'olelo. Right? Maka'inana voice, too many foreigners in government. What's the problem? Foreigners in government. What's the solution? Get the foreigners out. How does Kamehameha III see the problem? If we had more competent Hawaiians, I would put those Hawaiians in those positions. But until we have trained competent Hawaiians, we have these people in those places at that time. What's Kamehameha III identify as the problem?
Competency. Yeah.
Education.
Wow.
So what's the solution to that problem?
Education.
Make our people competent. What problem are you trying to solve in 2026?
Education still, I think.
Some, others are also how to go home.
Yeah, true.
Right? Some are still, hey, get that foreigner out. Hey, get that. Not wrong, just different. Same mo'olelo, just whose voice then determines what problem you're identifying. What problem you're identifying then speaks to what your solution to that problem is. Same mo'olelo. Just are you shining the light on one voice, or are you shining the light on another voice? Both voices. I'm not saying don't shine the light on the Maka'inana.
Right. But
I'm just saying that's all. Like that's the only voice we've heard for the last 50 years in the scholarship. Tell me what my king said. But we couldn't ask that question because he was the king who gave us private property, who sold us out, who was listening to the missionaries, who was part of that Māhele bad narrative. You couldn't ask that question. And so now we can ask that question. Now that question begets a different problem. Now some of us are trying to solve the education problem. Others are still solving get foreigners out of positions of power. We need more Hawaiians in that department and that department and that department. Not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying you've identified a different problem and therefore you have a different solution, does that problem fix the mo'olelo? Maybe one aspect of the mo'olelo, but there's still another question, many more questions from that mo'olelo, right? And so this is where perspective, and that's part of that Marxist, right? We didn't want to know what the ali'i thought because they were part of the bourgeoisie. They were part of the top. We don't want to. The top guys have had their voice. We need to give voice to the people, the guys on the bottom, right? And not wrong, just well represented. That's the only narrative that has been getting the light shined on it and the story told for a very long time. Right?
Well, if we take that topography, the 10,000-foot view of, okay, here is a country that was a constitutional monarchy occupied by a quote unquote republic, then if I was a republic, I mean, just yesterday, right? July 4th, 1776, what are we celebrating? We're celebrating the defeat, the pushing out or pushing back against British
of the monarchy.
Of the monarchy. Yeah. So now you have an occupation of a republic that doesn't like monarchies, sort of highlighting these faults within the monarchy, and not saying that there weren't there. I think there's no such thing as a perfect government or a perfect country or a perfect person. But the fact that, you know, if you realize and kind of take back the pride of being a Polynesian, and what I mean by that is, if you look across Polynesia, we were a hierarchical society. We were hierarchical in Tahiti, that bring the Ari'i structure to Hawaii in like 1200 AD. There's the hierarchy structure in Tonga, right? In Tonga, they completed the Olympic Games and win gold medals in Taekwondo, right? It works for them. It works for the culture of Polynesia. And I think that's why Kamehameha, when he was examining, and to just learn today that, you know, the Māhele was maybe through our research of Prussia. I think everybody just needs to let that sink in a little bit. Like, let's take a moment. 1812 in Prussia, right? The Hawaiians were so observant. They were looking at what was happening in Prussia, right? And I believe we actually...
Well, they asked if there was another example. They didn't use Prussia as the model.
Right.
They asked, hey, is there another example of this three classes having rights thing? And then William Little Lees and those guys record, those guys' response was, oh, Prussia.
And I believe we get a treaty with Prussia in like 1879 as a Hawaiian Kingdom.
Yep.
So I've been following, if you guys haven't been following, the Native Hawaiian Student Center with Dr. Willie Kawai, who wrote his dissertation on the color of nationality, right? Which I thought was really interesting. Because when we start saying haole go home, we forget about we would kick out Haunani K. Trask, technically, because, and I know it's going to sound pretty bold, but I found a document with John Trask that naturalized in the Hawaiian Kingdom in 1854. You cannot kick out Haunani Trask's great-great-grandpa and have Haunani Trask today, right? But because this Hawaiian Kingdom was such an inclusive, multi-ethnic society, you might not know who you're kicking out, right? So
you should probably use a different example, because
I know if you're going to get mad at me.
The haters are going to say, "Oh, he said we should kick out."
No, I'm not saying.
No, I know it's
because we're related. So she's my aunt. Like, we're related somehow. So
okay, so you
that's ohana. I'm not talking. I'm talking about my own ohana technically. You know, Waimea. It's like Parkers, Spencers, Purdy's. We all one family. So, no. But what I'm saying is I think that's the beauty of the Hawaiian Kingdom that gets overlooked. You know, when we treat it as this colony, we look at indigeneity and race. When we look at a multi-ethnic country that had treaties with Prussia, and even when you go into Iolani Palace, you see this system of governance that competence trumped race. And in the 19th century, that wasn't the case, right? In order to be a leader, you had to be that ethnicity of that country. And I think this is what helps propel the Hawaiian Kingdom into becoming the modern country it was for the 19th century, and that we're kind of learning about. That's blowing my mind. I mean, how am I learning about this 19th century country? And I'm in 2026, and I'm like, how do we make a petition like the Kue petition today, even when we have internet? I don't know. You know, they were so
Yeah.
advanced they just astonish me.
I
So,
think I think they were nuanced.
mm,
Like, I think they were also advanced, but I would use nuanced. And they understood, they held the gray better than we can today, right?
mm,
Like today, I think a lot of people live in black and white,
right.
but then black and white is the gray, right? Like sometimes
Mm,
both can be true at the same
does this
time.
say, yeah, right.
And some people's brains can deal with that, other people's brains cannot.
Cannot, yeah.
And I think the Hawaiian brain dealt with the gray a lot
Mm,
more than and held those and Tipua has a article in Hulili that I used to have my students read in 107. And in there she quotes this poet, and I'm going to butcher the poem,
mm,
but it talks about the colors and the boundaries where one color of the sky, where the purple in the sky
mm,
stops and another color starts, and that like where is that boundary between these
mm.
different colors, and when one color stops being
Stops being that
a
color, yeah.
color and starts to become another color, and getting at that idea of this overlap and this gray and this, and go find her article and read that
Mm,
Antipua Kanahele in Hulili, um and you'll get that poem. I forget the author of the original poem, but it was this beautiful, like, where does one thing start and another thing
and another
end?
thing, yeah.
And it's that gray, it's that nuance of when does this fish become this fish, right? Like,
Mm,
and it's not just a fish. It's like now we're like making very keen observations, right? Like that kilo and that loi loi, that analysis of we can't just look, but then now we have to analyze and break down, right? Like we can look intensively, but then now it's like, okay, where does one thing become a different thing?
mm.
And yeah, is
I think that's a powerful observation. My grandfather was Kohuna La'au. I think it's a very Hawaiian concept too. It's like there's dark, there's light, there's duality, there's kane, there's right, there's
yeah,
hina, and then there's the middle, right? There's there's the blend, and how we were accepting of we were just observant, like you were saying, you know, observant of all things, and trying to make um, educated assumptions and guesses. Like I think I did a video about the High Hawaii, and you know, people see the Union Jack and colonization, you know, like every oh my gosh. But I see Konane when you talk about the Mahele, I see
yep,
Konane. I said they're just playing Konane at an international level. It's just the same game, different different rules.
yeah. And now it's not just Hawaiian chief to Hawaiian chief. Now it's Hawaiian chief to English
Pr-
king, British king.
Prussian
Like,
King or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
now there's the
the board is expanded.
the players on the board have expanded. I'm not just dealing with
Hmm.
Kahikili from Maui, and now it's, oh, I got King Louis from Britain. Like it's, but they're playing the game.
Yeah.
They, they
I think one of my favorite things was I think didn't King George kind of go pupule? He
mhm.
like and in our constitution we're like, oh, what happens if our king goes pupule, like goes nuts? And then we put in our constitution that our king has to not be convicted of a heinous crime and also not be
An idiot.
an idiot. Viewers, let that sink in,
Which speaks to the competence, right? Like,
right?
which in today's American narrative, it's hard to talk about competence, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's one side of the story, and the other side of the, like, so it gets politicized through the American lens today, but it's
Right.
our ancestors. We go back to that story about Kamehameha the Third. We don't have people who understand international law who know how to play that game.
Mm.
And then what do? They send Wilcox, they send Kalakaua to study abroad. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's go learn the game. Let's go figure this out so we can then have our own people in these positions, right? And
Yeah, I
but then
think, yep, you're right.
it's a it's what question are you asking and answering? It's going to be if you want to if I have a sprained ankle and you give me Dimetap, not going to help my sprained ankle.
Mm.
Like, if you want to fix the problem, you got to properly identify the problem. And which question do you want to answer? Do you want to get our people competent, or you want to get foreigners out of positions of power? I'm not saying one is wrong. I'm just they solve different questions and different answers, and I
Mm.
back to your kahuna question or kahuna comment, right? Like, the one thing that I think we lost with all of that depopulation was that kahuna class, kind of
Mm.
structurally, right? When you're elevating one and everybody's now the same,
Right, right, right.
whose job is it in Hawaiian society to know how many ahupua are supposed to be on that map?
Mm.
In traditional times, it was the kahuna's job, right? There was a class of people whose job it was, maybe not to know all of Hawaii Island, but Umi had his census takers, and oh, you sit here on this mauna and count the people, and right, it was
Right,
different
right.
people's jobs to know what the ahupua were. In
Mm.
2026, whose job is it to have that 10,000, 30,000 foot view and to know all of the ahupua for an island?
Mm.
We have many people whose job it is to take care of their ahupua and their piece that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Whose job is it to know what are all of the ahupua for Kohala? What are all of the ahupua for Puna? What are all of the ahupua for Kona,
Mm.
Hilo, Hamakua? Right? And so I don't know that anybody takes that as their job,
Mm.
which is what part of the reason why we don't know how many ahupua there are supposed to be on that map, right?
Mm.
And so that the loss of that, either through depopulation or the loss of that structure through the loss of kapu and that class of kahuna and those ways of knowing. But
Mm.
like, if there's a king, he should be developing that class of knowledge, because we have to know. It has to be somebody's job to know how that there are 48 states on that map. America has the luxury of majority of the population should know the answer to that question. I don't know that Hawaii, we're starting way behind, because just take, maybe it's not the island. If you're from Kohala, do you know all of the ahupua in Kohala?
Mm.
Within 10%. Can you give me a number that is within 10% of the correct number?
Mm.
I think people's numbers would be probably within 50%, not 10%, which means we're still not that close. Right? And
Right, right,
so
right, right.
and your starting place for that is go transcribe the Māhele book, and you have a baseline.
Mm.
The number's going to get larger, not smaller, but the Māhele book is going to have the majority of those ahupua'a names. So are there 1,000 ahupua'a for a Hawaii island in the Māhele book, or are there 1,500, or are there 500?
Mm.
Right?
Right, right,
What
right.
is anyone's guess? Like any of your listeners, take a guess for each of the islands, right? I'm gonna think you're gonna be probably at least 50% off. That means we lost half our land title
Oh, wow.
through consciousness, right? Through just not knowing.
Mm.
Whereas Americans know, well, there's 48 states.
Mm. Well, I have to thank you for all of your time and being here today. We can continue going, but I just had a respect for the the time that you've already shared with us. I think maybe it would be a good idea to wrap it up and kind of end with one last question for you. And again, this is supposed to open the door for more people to do research, and hopefully this conversation inspires someone to begin learning about Hawaiian land history, transcribing the Māhele, like you're saying, getting people encouraged to start studying Hawaiian history directly from Hawaiian sources and original sources. Um, if there's one thing that you hope people reconsider about the Māhele after reading your research, what would that be?
I think it would be to reconnect with and regain that respect for our ancestors.
Mm.
Understanding that our ancestors were smart and brilliant. They weren't manipulative. They weren't greedy. I'm talking about Kamehameha the Third specifically here.
Mm.
Yeah, that imagine being the guy that gives all of his power away, and then you're remembered in the exact opposite light, right? Like, how
Mm.
do we
Yeah.
go from I gave up my absolute powers, I elevated the people through law, and I elevated the people through land managers and land ownership, and people still think I'm a scrub. How do we like that's you want the most of if we can't I think it was a Malcolm X documentary I was watching. It was talking about if they can get you to not have respect and pride for your ancestors, then you have no heroes. You have no heroes,
Mm.
you detach from the past. You detach from the past, then they got you in the present, right? Like then they're just driving narratives in the present because you don't have any heroes or anyone to look up to in, right? Like we got respect for Lili'u and we got respect for Kamehameha the First. Everyone in between was part of that contact period,
Mm.
right? And we don't have the respect for them because someone was speaking in his ear and he was foreign influenced, and when it was the exact opposite, right? And so having respect for our ancestors so we can have those heroes again. And I don't mean that without
Mm.
accountability,
Sure.
right? Like, if I'm being fair, I think Kalakaua should be held accountable for signing the Bayonet Constitution, right? Like, we're coming from a warrior class who was on the front lines of the battle. They risked their lives. That was part of leadership, right? So, like, the threat of loss of life, that's kind of part of the deal. I don't, Kamehameha was on the front lines. Kekuhaupio was on the front lines. Kahikili was on the front lines. Like, death was part of leadership, right?
Mm.
You didn't. So I think there's criticism I'm not saying we shouldn't criticize our ancestors. I think Kalakaua could be held accountable to that idea and that perspective. If you know what how the Bayonet Constitution took away the executive's power and handled, like you talk about opening the door, that was the opening of the door, and they stepped through the door because now they had power of the executive. That wasn't just opening the door, that was their introduction to power in governance, right? Bayonet Constitution gave the foreigners power in governance, whether it was lawful or not. They now had control of the executive through the cabinet, and that was through the bayonet, right? And so I'm not saying don't criticize. I'm just saying,
Right.
hey, we
Yeah.
can still have respect while also holding accountable. There are
Yeah.
other things he did. He's also the first circumnavigate the globe, and he's celebrated for all those things. But part of that analysis, it's also fair to, hey, I don't think the kings before you would have signed this document just because their life was threatened. That's, or at least that's my perspective. Others can have different perspectives, but I'm not saying we shouldn't be accountable. I'm just saying, but for Kamehameha the Third, like he gave up all his power. He elevated the Makainana class, and he still gets a bad rap. And so we need heroes. We need, and I was saying blind, but
Right.
I think there are people who deserve it, and they're on the other half of the narrative. And it's not white people who are saying, it's not foreigners who are saying, right now it's us and our own people who are saying Mahele bad. It's not them telling us. Now it's us telling our own people these narratives. That's how effective these things have been, right? It's not a Haole teacher in the classroom telling me Mahele bad. Now it's Hawaiians telling me Mahele bad on Instagram, on podcasts, and you can have your opinion. I'm not saying you can't have your opinion, but understand where, if you have thought about it and you have come up with that story on your own, that's one thing. If you heard someone tell you that story and then you're repeating that story, I would ask you to think a little deeper about it, right? You can have your opinion, but did you form your opinion on your own, or are you just repeating a story you heard?
Right.
Those are different things. And if you're just repeating a story you heard, then that's maybe when you should go do a little bit, or have the humility to say, hey, I don't have an opinion on that because I didn't study it. I just heard stories about it.
Right. And just to kind of bring some balance to, like you said, like the gray area, right? When you were talking about Kalakaua, I think he was born on a day of war. And I think that's what his name meant. Kala, the day of Kaua, right? The day of war. Some sort of conflict was happening on his birth. So how prophetic that he would be the one under a bayonet, later on in his life. And I'm in Reno, Nevada, and there are a lot of, it's very conservative, okay? Especially right now. And I'm part African American. So, we have these run-ins with the domestic terrorism. Let's just say domestic, right? They have 3 letters in their name. I won't say it on the podcast, but you know what I'm talking about. But after the Civil War, because that particular group was prior to the Civil War and they were already running. But after the Civil War, what I find interesting, and I can't confirm this, but this is just some of my research. I think, because even today they would be classified as a domestic terrorist, right? But after the Civil War, they kind of don't call themselves that. They call themselves rifle clubs. I'm not sure if you heard about that, but so I think it's very interesting that the Honolulu Rifles would be the one to force a person of color that was a head of state. And if it's not domestic terrorism, then what was it? Right. And if you look at their bylaws, They're very straightforward about all white rule, and I mean, it looks pretty pointy hat club to me. But that's just as an African American kind of looking at what happened to Hawaii. Um, but you're right. I think, as someone that descends from a warrior chief culture, um, I could see that perspective. Um, but on the other hand, I also see he could be. I honestly feel like he was surrounded by terrorists or assassins or whatever you'd foreign, right, threatening his cabinet. So he had that to deal with. And when he writes Hawaii Pono'i, right, he literally, the last verse is defend Kamehameha with spears. So I think he had the concept. And then he sends Robert Wilcox, right, to learn under Gibaldi and to come back and bring. I mean, really, if you look at a mo'i that was trying to militarize the Hawaiian Kingdom and kind of protect us and create that royal guard, um, you have the three princes sent to the military school in San Mateo, right? So I think he was trying, right? I don't think
Yeah.
he was definitely in a slower process attempting to establish some sort of counter defense. Um, so, um, but I think even Kalakaua, he gets such a bad light. But the circumnavigation's a huge thing, right? Before any king or president doing that, and I forget how many languages he spoke, but even him, with all his faults, could be someone's hero, And I know he drank a little bit, but who didn't for the time? Like if you're comparing apples to oranges, and I think Tiffany Lonnie Ng did a really good job on reclaim Kalakaua, but maybe there should be a book on reclaiming Kauikeoli, right? And Timoteo Ha'alilio and Joseph Navahi and just there's so many heroes out John Wise, right? There's so many heroes out there, and I don't know. I like Marvel movies. So any Marvel movie that comes out, I always want to know what they're known for and what their power is. But I think in Hawaii we have those, um, and want to thank you for being an expert in knowledge is power. So I consider your understanding of the Land Commission Wars. If somebody was starting and wanted to like search or start the search after transcribing the Mahele, where would they go from there?
Um, it it depends. Like, if you're serious
Mhm.
about land title, then I think the best place to start would be to transcribe the Mahele book.
Mm.
It's not sexy. It's not, but bring this full circle. This comes from my story of Lloyd Soren.
Mm.
Lloyd Soren did it. Why can't we?
Why can't we?
Why
There you
can't
go.
we? Right? He did that and many other documents, right? And so, it's 200 pages, do one page a day, and in a year, you've done it. And one page will take you 10 minutes. Like
Mhm.
it's not a big lift, And so it's possible. Lloyd did
Yeah.
it, right? Like no money, no
Mm.
grants, he just sat down and did it. And so if you're really serious, that's gonna be like going through the mud on one hand, like what's the point of this? But it's one
Mhm.
of those exercises where writing all of these place names, seeing how this book is organized, seeing all the different names, you're gonna have an intimacy with Hawaiian place names that you won't get doing anything else. Um, if you're just into like, I don't want to say surface level, but just, hey, I'd like to know more about the Mahele, start with my 4 videos. Um, there's no book that I can point you to right now. Start with the 4 videos. And I mean, I think half of our conversation today was about perspective and
Mm.
what questions to ask, what questions you're asking and answering, what subconscious frameworks are you looking, lenses are you bringing into the conversation to look at something with? Are you bringing in your understanding of American politics, and you have this subconscious understanding that equality, power of the people, because that's what you learned? Well, that's fine. Just understand that's not necessarily a monarchical perspective, right? Like when the Prince of England has a child, there's millions of British nationals in the streets celebrating the birth of that child.
Mm.
Does that happen in a republic? No, doesn't. It's a kind of different thing, right? Like there's a
Mm.
different reverence, there's a different respect. If you talk to people from European countries in monarchies, they have a different kind of reverence, different kind of respect for. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but there is a cultural difference, right? Where, hey, in America, it's like, no, no man's above me. We're all created equal. It's a different perspective, background than if you come from hierarchy. Is a respect. There is a hierarchy in things, right? And
Mm.
so just yeah, Mahele book on the one hand. There's you can start with my 4 videos. I'll be working on a book soon. So hopefully in a year or 2 we can say, hey, where would you start? Well, go read my book. But that's not available right now. That is in the form of those videos and these podcasts and these different conversations. But again, verify. Trust what I say, but verify what I say. Don't hold me on a pedestal. Verify it, you know. The Hawaii State Archives, if you Google Hawaii State Archives, Mahele book, you can get a copy of the Mahele book. I was working on a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox and couldn't tell if that was an I or that was a cursive E or if that was just dirt on the paper, on
dust.
the dust on the Xerox machine, right? Like, and so you can get a very nice, clean, legible copy and you can start. Hey, Donovan, I can answer your question. There are X amount of ahupua'a for whatever island you live on, right? Like imagine if you just did it for your island,
Mm.
whatever island you're on. Oh, I counted 559. Oh, I counted 573. What's the 14 difference? What did I miss?
Mm.
Even if we just start having those kinds of conversations, right? Like then
Right.
we're within that 10% ballpark, not, oh shoot, I only thought there were 200. There's
Mm.
570. Wow. Right? Like imagine that.
Yeah.
We miss half the ahupua'a.
Yeah.
And
Like,
so that's where I would start. Depending
okay.
on the level of proficiency you want to get to. And go back to my stories. Other haole have done it. Why can't we?
Mm. Well,
Sit
yeah.
down, do the work,
Get down, get your hands dirty.
get your hands dirty,
kind of, that
get your hands in the mud.
you gotta, we're children of the kalo for a reason, right? We gotta, instead of a handout, no ho'i lalo, right? Put your hand down. So I'm really excited. I didn't want to pressure you. I know we've talked about the book, but I'm glad you mentioned it, not me, because I was like, I don't want to, I want to keep this nonchalant.
No,
But
I know you put the ball on the tee for me and like,
yeah,
hey, you touch this. I don't want to be the one.
yeah. I'm salivating over it. Can't wait. When it does, obviously I'll provide a link below, and I'll always wish you the best. I really appreciate your time. Mahalo nui loa.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Aloha.
Evelina mai kako, and welcome to the Hawaiian Kingdom Podcast. Evelina mai kako.